All right, so I just showed you what the default brush in Photoshop could do. And I can certainly make a painting this way, but it will definitely look like a digitally created piece of art. So before I go too much further, I am going to create a new background because we want to really organize our layers so we don't have to worry about them. So I'm going to duplicate that background, fill it with white. And you want to keep your background clean. So I'm going to keep a white background, whether it's a background layer or not, and I'm going to lock it. And maybe I'll actually rename this white canvas, okay, to use kind of the paint metaphor. Now on top of it, we're going to have our base color layer, which is kind of like your rough painting. And it can be a sketch, it can be shape-based, it can be line-based. So I'll say sketch layer. And this one I'm just going to hide. I kind of like it, so I might mess with it later. I can just turn it off. But my rough sketch layer, that's the one I'm actually going to work on right now. So I'm going to mark it green. But instead of using the default brush, I'm going to create a brush. So how do we do that? I'm going to change to default colors, which is this little default foreground background icon right above our foreground background squares in the toolbar. I'm going to click on that. I'm going to create a new Photoshop file that is, well, let's keep it on inches. Let's make it 4 by 4 inches at 350, right? And now I'm going to make something that looks more like a sponge. And I'm going to scroll through these default brushes in Photoshop. Even though we're creating our own brush, I'm going to get there by using some of the things that are here. So I've got this kind of spongy brush. Let's start by making a mess of that. Notice the lighter I push, the lighter it is. You don't have to use that one. You can use another. Here's another. I'll make this one really big, but this is more of a scattered brush. See how it's softer edged? I'll layer that on top a little bit. Now I'm in a square. I want to have a shape. I don't want to just fill up the square. So think of what a brush looks like. And I like to use rounds mostly. So this is the kind of brush tip I'm used to. So that's roughly the shape I'm going for. But I'm going to do it at a tilt that takes up kind of that space. Right now I can even try some of these brush tips. I'm just painting with black, and you can see I can flare out those brushes in lots of different ways. And if I push harder, it can really build up. And basically the brushes I build in Photoshop, if I were doing an ink painting, this would be like the little test strip of paper off to the side. I try to just put lots of different effects in there. Some soft edges, some hard edges, because you'll see as we use it that we can make this work. But I don't want everything to go in just one direction. It's more like I've taken a brush and I've just smushed it against the paper. And some of the ink is really dark and some of it's softer. And on and on. Now you can download lots of brushes. You can find lots of brushes. I haven't played with this one yet. That's kind of a straight sponge. It's kind of boring. But the key is not just downloading cool brushes. That's a little too heavy. Let's play at a lower opacity. The key is to be able to modify them and to make them work for what you need. So yeah, you can do what's called wet edges. We can play with texture. All that can be brought into any brush you choose. So that's why we're going to build this. Okay, now I've built up this kind of black blob, right? Now, before I turn it into a brush tip, I'm going to erase from it. And it's good to remember, even though in disciplined digital painting, we only use the paint brush, we're not going to erase. You just paint with other colors when you want to paint over. Here I can erase from this and create better effects. And it will erase by painting with white, basically. So if I think I overdid it in some places, I can erase away. And lastly, I'll take a textured brush like this, make it really big, and just kind of bite away from the edges a little. Maybe cut through the middle just a bit. I'm going to get a truly customized brush tip, kind of flaring out. All right, so if that's my brush, you know what this actually looks like a lot? It looks like what powdered graphite looks like. So this is kind of a soft pastel brush or a vine charcoal brush that I'm going to create. Some of those edges are a little hard. I'll soften them a bit with my eraser. Okay, now how do I turn that into a brush? This is already pretty big. So that's going to, we started at 4 by 4 inches by 350 because that's going to give us a nice brush size where we can make it really quite large if we need to. But now I go to Edit and I say Define Brush Preset. And it will take what I just made and I'm going to call it Carl's SP17 Brush Demo. Give it a name so you can find it. And then it's going to add it right to my brush catalog at the very end. So there's my brush. So now I can close this. I don't need to save it because I have the brush. And now I'm going to change my brush to the very end of my brush catalog. And there's my brush. If I just hit once with it, with the paint tool, not the eraser tool. So let me go back to my brush. There it is. That's at 50% opacity. Take it up to 100%. There it is. Now to paint with it, I might take a lower opacity. And you can see it's going to build up with softer edges. We're going to learn next time how to customize it even more. So it's not always the same angle every time I touch it down. So it rotates. So it's not always the same size every time I touch it down. We're going to play with the scale versatility and its angle, and that's going to make all the difference in the world. All right, so for now, I'm going to save it, and that's where we'll be able to start the next demo. So this is creating your own brush.